Hello, welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. Danny here with Rob for the silliest of silly season updates. And this is a silly podcast because we sort of haphazardly threw it together and then new news kept breaking. Silly season kept finding new layers of silliness to appear to us. And then as it happens, we managed to find a time slot, and then some extra silliness happened at Drew's work and he was not able to make it. He may turn up mid-recording. I also have to stop at a certain stage and put my daughter to bed. So that's the silliness that's going on here. Rob, it's silly season, but you seem remarkably sort of tuned in and you don't have any weird drama going on tonight. You are the rock that will hold us through this podcast, I think.
Yeah, I've been eager to talk about this stuff for the better part of a week now.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to chew into. I'm eager to do it too. I wanted to give a reminder to everyone that if they want to, for some insane reason, this is literally the worst time to go back to the preseason primer of last year, because next week we will be recording our new preseason primer for the season 2024. But if you do want to, it's episode 216. You can go back and learn about F1. It's perfectly suited for folks with no prior F1 knowledge, as will next week's. Also on the Patreon side, we put up just a couple of weeks back the latest Patreon exclusive podcast. It was the Michael Fassbender Road to Le Mans, the film review. And much to popular demand, yes, we will be covering Ferrari on this month's Patreon exclusive podcast. Perhaps even more appropriate than ever, considering the conversations we're going to have right now. Also, massive thanks to all of our incredible title sponsors who help us out over at patreon.com/shift1, along with thousands of others of you. Massive thanks to Mojo Nixon Gaming, Get Rich or Die Ryan, which I have confirmed it is that. I just can't spell on this document. Agave ATX, Cypress Training Turf SCS, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, App Analytics Telemetry Deck TDF1 Team, which may be a reference to something from last week, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foote, Abdullah Al-Thani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, the Space Above Us podcast, Bunny Fiend, The Snigs, Alex Goucher, Max Faltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Romph, Ralph Bury, Lachlan the Madden Man, and of course, Jason Kelly. Thank you all so much for your incredible support. Rob, where do we start? Does all of this start? Does it start with Hamilton? Is this where it starts, or does it start somewhere else? Or before maybe we jump into the dirge of news, what have you made of the past week? Because it's been just like breakneck. Like it seemed like every 2 seconds there was new. I wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready for F1 news, but F1 news was like, I don't care. It's coming.
Yeah, I had definitely like a day or so of being irritated about the Andretti bid, which we'll get to in a few moments here. But like that felt like stuff we would cover maybe the next time we did a regular episode. Not a huge surprise, but the cynicism was certainly something that would take you aback. And then there were little contract things breaking in the in the last couple weeks that didn't seem particularly notable. But I guess if you were to say like, where did things start? Might
have been
in retrospect, it was probably the Charles Leclerc contract extension, because if you were going like if that was the first inkling that things might be a little bit weird. I certainly didn't think that it was going to get this weird, but people noticed the Ferrari announced that Leclerc was going to be extended in late January.
Yeah,
I don't think they've given an exact time frame. We knew what his contract was, and now we don't in terms of his contract term. I think that's a little bit that part is a little bit vague. Which makes me wonder if there might also be clauses there, which we'll come to in a second. But the contract term is a little vague. And then, Danny, I would say Leclerc and Sainz seemed like a good partnership.
Yeah.
And so it was a bit odd that Leclerc was, we heard that he had an extension.
Yes.
And then we did not hear about Carlos.
No, we didn't. And I feel like we touched upon some of this at the end of last season. We actually posited, I think it was the end of last season, I think we hypotheticaled about what if Hamilton were to leave. But the signs thing was definitely something we were talking about because of something else we'll get into a little bit later, which is that there's quite a lot of contracts that are up at the end of this year. And Carlos seems to be, you know, I don't necessarily see him as a championship winner in the Ferrari as it is, but he's among the best drivers in the field. And certainly, if they don't want him, someone else will. We are, of course, talking about the breaking news. It was not breaking anymore. At one stage, breaking news, shocking news to many, that Hamilton is leaving Mercedes, not this year, but at the end of this year, to start with the Tifosi, with Ferrari in 2025 for the final year of the current regulations, which in and of itself is actually sort of an interesting time to move. It seems like maybe, though, it was kind of a now or never situation. Yeah. In the days preceding it was a rumor for a couple of hours, then it was pretty much confirmed without being confirmed, and then a bunch of announcements came out from both teams, from Toto, eventually from Lewis. It was sort of like a slow enough drip of information. Ratcheting it back, we found out that Toto found out pretty like a day before we did, basically. There's a quote here from planetf1.com. He said, "The events are not a surprise, but maybe the timing. So what happened is that we got together for coffee in my place in Oxford, and him returning to the factory, and he said to me he decided to race for Ferrari in 2025. So they had a sort of a little chinwag get together at Toto's house.
Well, and just real quick, I think this touches on Hamilton's last contract go round with Mercedes took an unusual length of time.
It did.
And it was in the wake of Abu Dhabi 2021.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of, who knows what his future is with the sport. What does he want? But there's just a moment there where, like, both he and Wolff were out of contract for a moment. It was sort of unsure where things were going to be headed. I feel like this was right after 2021. I might be wrong.
I think it was, because I remember the feeling around it was, is he done entirely, / is he done with this team? Will he go to Red Bull? Was kind of the fantastical thing we were saying back then.
And then, like, in whatever was the latest contract term agreed to, we didn't know this, but there was an exit clause that had to be triggered, that basically for next season, for not this coming season, but for next season. And I'm really curious how far those talks with Ferrari advanced. Like, how long has this been going on?
Right.
But yes, it certainly now seems like some of the length of Mercedes coming to terms with Lewis the last time they extended probably centered on the fact that he wanted to maintain some flexibility.
Yeah, I wonder, especially if there is, it's hard to tell how commonplace break clauses are. I'm sure they are in some scenarios, but, like, obviously anyone who's, investing that much in any sports athlete wants to know that they have them locked down for a certain amount of time. So I can't imagine that they are rampant. You know what I mean?
Driver having the power to exercise the break clause. That's a lot of power for the driver. And I just don't think there's a lot of drivers who would have the sway to be able to, like, that I am worth so much that me having the ability to walk at a moment of my choosing it's still valuable enough to keep me in the car knowing that I might leave. I feel like that is a Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, like, tier of contract clause. And I suspect there's not many drivers that have anything like that.
Yeah, especially in the wake of, presumably there is a financial hit on his side. Obviously, he's not going to get, the money that was due him, but I also wonder if he eats some of that. One of the things that's come out, which I found very interesting, is in some of the reporting around the deal itself that he has with Ferrari, which seems to be a lot larger than just his take-home pay at the end of the month on his slip. It's reported that Hamilton initially turned in a 2-year deal worth just over $50 million a season. Ferrari chairman John Elkman leading negotiations, which were reignited by Ferrari granting Hamilton's wish for investment into his Mission 44 organization, while further perks were sent his way. And then one other note on that, the terms agreed to by Hamilton reportedly include a pay package just north of 87 million for 25, with the option to extend for 26, a quarter of that going into mission 44, while Elkman has offered to create a joint investment fund with via Ferrari's parent brand Exor, worth over 272 million, where Hamilton would serve as ambassador for his portfolio. And I did read somewhere else, I forget the exact specifics of it, but this idea of him being the ambassador for the portfolio was rejected by Mercedes at a different time. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me here. So there's two elements of this. I guess one is you can see maybe someone at the end of their career making sure that they're sort of, once they wrap it up, that they have milked as much out of the cow as they can, or that at least it's setting them up for the future in terms of business. And then the other thing is, I wonder how this relates to the cost cap stuff. Like, the drivers are exempt, is that right?
The top 3 salaries on any team.
Okay. So I guess if you're going to go, be hung for a sheep as a lamb in this case, if they're going to get somebody, they might as well go crazy with it. What do you make of all this, Rob? In that, like, I guess the question is, Lewis seems like a shrewd businessman, but to me, he has never seemed like somebody who was primarily motivated by money. I think he probably enjoys he enjoys nice clothes, he enjoys his fashion, he enjoys the projects that he works on, but I don't know if you become the sort of killer athlete like him. There's diminishing returns when you're already a multimillionaire and that's your motivation. To me, I don't see that as the reason why he is moving. What's your initial gut on Hamilton's decision here?
Well, if the stuff about like the joint investment fund being created, for effectively for Lewis to be the front of this investment vehicle, that is really interesting. I want to know more. I'm not entirely sure what the structure is of Ferrari. Used to be owned by Stellantis, which is Chrysler. All of it is owned by the Agnelli family, which is, or at least like they have a huge share of that. Elkan is a member of that family.
This is an American, sort of like an Italian family in America, right?
Yeah, like I think the matriarch of his family is an Agnelli, and then his father married into the Agnellis. And as we've alluded to before, there's also weird familial dynastic politics around, like I believe
with an Italian rich Italian family, surely not, Rob.
Yeah, I want to say like his mom might have been suing other members of the family for like basically like stealing assets or cool. Sort of screwing her out of like ability to oversee family assets. But the where this all gets weird is like Ferrari got spun off and outside of Stellantis some years back, and that was Sergio Marchionne. Wanted to sort of get the two brands separate, and I'm not entirely sure where Exor fits into this.
Right.
What relationship Exor has to like two publicly held companies, two publicly traded companies. Lewis is. There's always been people who've had a cynical view of Lewis.
Yeah.
That he is too good and too polished in terms of just like the ability to present himself as being on the right side of every issue. Jacques Villeneuve sort of alluded to this, that something about Lewis means that like in 50-50 accidents, other people will get blamed. That, people like Lewis comes out of a lot of things smelling like a rose, even though you can look at them and say like, well, it kind of feels like it was again, it was 50-50. It should have been, but Lewis is very good at sort of coming across like the fair, clean competitor, man of honor, right. It's sort of a tank full of sharks. And with that lens in mind, you'd say like, well, of course, like, Lewis has this activist bent and has always sort of like said that as part of his interest beyond racing, but that also maybe has been priming the ground for him wanting to break into tycoon stuff. The elite world of capital.
Get in the room. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's there could be something to that. He's never made any secret of the fact that he has interests in business. Years ago, he was talking about like he really likes fashion. He wanted to do fashion stuff. Now every F1 driver, will at some point in the interview be like, I like fashion. I want to do fashion stuff.
Especially if you're a part of AlphaTauri, you really had to like fashion, and also incredibly skinny fashion.
I suspect no one else would ever fit. This is why all these dudes are like, I'm into fashion. Yeah, dude, everything fits you. Everything fits you, bro. Yeah, fashion's fucking awesome for you. But
that's like saying I'm into watches if you're an F1 driver. It's like all you're ever given is fancy fashion and watches. So like, of course you're into fashion. You're not into, there's nothing else rich things people can give you. I'm into petrol.
Yeah, and then you're like, well, how much? Like, starting a fashion line doesn't seem that expensive because at a certain point, it's really not for the type of money to make fast fashion.
Teespring, man, anyone can do it.
Yeah,
use offer code Shift. No, we don't have a sponsor.
But the other part where you see this with Lewis is that he's always been concerned. He was increasingly concerned over the past few years. Is like, what comes after me? The sport's gotten more elite. There is. Not in terms of competition, but in terms of just like who gets a chance to come in through the door. He's often very pointed about like he grew up in council housing,
right? And
there is not gonna be another driver for as far as we can tell who is likely to come from that sort of background anytime soon. So he's expressed concerns about like the ladder behind him, and then racial diversity in the sport.
100%.
He's been out in front of social justice movements, and part of the conclusion that he reached publicly some years ago with the Mission 44 stuff is that ultimately there's going to have to be investment and putting money behind addressing some of these inequalities. And so from that standpoint, it's also entirely consistent with him not only taking the higher salary, but sort of demanding Ferrari throw in with Mission 44 and maybe create some sort of investment vehicle that he can, be tied to in some sort of public facing role. I think what might be, here's my actual suspicion. I think it's really easy to delude yourself that like you getting wildly rich is going to do the world good. And
yeah.
I think his heart. I suspect Lewis's heart is probably in the right place, and also he is. When you see the possibility to be like, here are the resources we're going to put in your command. Think of what what you can do with all those resources. Very tempting to be like, yeah, I could do great works with those resources. Ultimately time will tell. I think, it's sort of the pattern of these things that, they make progress around the margins, but leave the structural, factors untouched.
Totally.
But this is just the way of the world. This is probably a standard we wouldn't hold anyone else to except Lewis.
That's very true. Exactly. Yeah. And, it's easy to, you apply all those same ideas about, when there's a success story and people are that success story, they think like that is reflective of the world outside of them, or, the amount of pressure you put on somebody like Lewis as opposed to basically every other non-black driver, you know what I mean, in a similar situation, or didn't grow up in a super privileged, and there is other drivers like Esteban Ocon we've talked about, and it's not. And there's a difference in the wealth between some of these drivers as well. I don't think, Bottas and Leclerc grew up in different types of environments, But what do you think about it from a, because I'm with you. I think he's a very smart guy. And I think he's probably not very trusting, which I think in the world of that level of business is a really smart way to be. And I think he has his head screwed on and he's not going to be taken advantage of, and he probably has smart people around him and he's a good businessman or surrounded by good business people. But from a racing perspective, what do you make of this decision? He's in the twilight years of his career, save for some sort of like Schumacher 41 coming back to Mercedes sort of run around, which is more of a testimonial years. In terms of like winning a championship, does this feel like a throw of the dice for him winning a championship? Does it feel like a fuck it, I want to drive the red car, man. Everyone wants to drive the red car. I love Ferrari growing up. Let's give it a go. You know, what do you make of this, especially in light of the fact that he's going a year before the reg change? Is that a worry or is that the point? Because if he's there was lots of reporting about him not being happy with that new Mercedes a couple of years back, feeling that his feedback isn't necessarily being listened to. Presumably, if he's going over to Ferrari, and we'll talk about how Leclerc might feel about all this later, do you think this is a smart decision on his part from a racing perspective?
Nobody ever knows how car development is going to pan out.
Right.
I think Ferrari is as likely as Mercedes to have a car challenging the Red Bull for wins in 2025. I think they are probably about as likely, maybe less likely than Mercedes to have a successful entrant with the new regulations in 2026. Just the history there is that with new power units coming on, like that was Mercedes' competitive edge. It will be relevant again in 2026, and it's where Ferrari kind of stumbled last time we had a big upheaval like this. So I think it's from the standpoint of someone like Lewis, this is really a kind of, you'd have to be realistic and know this is at best a 50-50 shot. That, you know, what he managed to pull off when he went to Mercedes doesn't happen. Like nobody, Fernando Alonso tried to orchestrate moves like this 2 or 3 times throughout his
he
career.
Did, you're right. Yeah.
Daniel Ricciardo staked his career on like, I've got to get with an up and coming manufacturer and sort of ride the bubble, ride the way to the top. And it doesn't pan out. It's very rare that it does. So I think he has to know on some level that, being realistic, it's unlikely that lightning will strike twice. Maybe because it happened to him, that he thinks he is the factor that will make things break his way. But I suspect he knows that this is an iffy proposition, as it always is for drivers. To me, this does feel like I've got one more move left in my career, one big last act, and I want to wear red. I suspect that for a lot of drivers, there's always a question of how would I do at Ferrari, and not just like how many race wins would I get, etc. But just what would it be like to be a Ferrari driver? How would I handle the pressure? How would I handle the fact that like almost the entire rest of the sport is based out of an industrial corridor in England,
right?
And then there's Ferrari over there, different culture, different way of building cars. Different place in the sporting landscape. The temptation, I think, is too great. Even though, again, for a lot of great drivers have gone through like Ferrari's doors and have not been great Ferrari drivers.
Right. I mean, Vettel did this exact play, maybe not for the same amount of money, and also he wasn't leaving the top. I guess it's like there's something. This deal feels very singular. Like you go back and try and find comparisons, and they're not the same. It's drivers who are won a championship but have been at aren't really the number one driver anymore, or I don't know. There's something about this that just feels very different. One of the things that I was hearing a lot about was Loic Serra's departure. A number of was it last year or a number of years back from Mercedes, who was engineer over there, who's head of vehicle performance. Him and Hamilton were fairly aligned with their concerns on the 2022 spec car, and he has gone to Ferrari. Some folks now sort of, joining some dots there. Hard to tell if it's a causation or a, if the chicken and an egg situation. Also questions over whether Bono is going to follow him or not, whether or not he's going to stick around at Mercedes or, head off to beautiful Italia.
I would not be surprised if Bono and Hamilton are done as well. Like it's just, he parted ways with Cullen last year. Angela Cullen, who was his trainer and performance coach. Like the other part of this is midlife crisis is probably the wrong way to put it, but things get stale.
Yeah.
Like you get tired of doing, even in a great job with great people, you get tired of doing the same job with the same people again and again.
Especially if you're not winning anymore. You know what I mean? He's winning for years and years, and it's suddenly you're with the same people, and it's lose, lose, lose.
All the stuff lands differently. What, like, think about, like, doesn't Total Wolf seem kind of silly when he's not winning? Like the same stuff. He says the same stuff. He carries the same, demeanor. But now it all seems like a little performative, a little try hard. Like, give it a rest, man. Like, you're down here with the rest of us. Like, you don't carry the sacred fire of like F1 success anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think my suspicion is, like, in the last couple of years, Hamilton started to want to change things up. And I think that is partly due to, Mercedes isn't winning anymore. And it is clear that he was frustrated, not just with the 2022 car, but when they decided to double down on that for 2023. And they get to the first race and they're like, whoops, we're completely lost. I would be losing my shit. I think I did lose my shit. That, like, they had a bad car for an entire year. They had one good result at kind of a fluky race, and they're like, let's double down on it. Let's run it back with our concept. And then they waste yet another year of development and another year of Hamilton's driving. So I suspect a little trust got broken there, because it doesn't seem like he ever really believed that there's anything about the 22 concept worth trying again in 23, but they went with it. But I think the bigger issue is, he just wants to try something new. And for a guy in his position, more wins, more championships, he likes it. It's good, but it's also stat padding, right? It's not like...
Well, is it though? Because, like, he had that era, the epoch of Hamilton, right? And then, and he's been on he's been on the sort of business end of a bruising from his arguably the best rival he's ever had. Like, you know what I mean? Who's been just completely dominating the sport. So I don't know. I think at a certain stage, maybe it's short term, but I think he starts to look fairly second fiddle if this continues to go. And he can always, this is a risky move. And if it doesn't pan out, hey, look, I tried it. If he stays at Mercedes and has another 2 years of being battered, like then it starts to look a bit like.
Yeah, I think you get battered at Ferrari too. Like, for me, I think like, it's not that the stats and, like, the legacy of getting another championship is all meaningless, but I suspect that, again, he's just as likely to have those those bites at the apple at Ferrari as he is at Mercedes. He's just as likely to be disappointed and watching Max just sail off into the sunset to another run of championships, the next Sebastian Vettel, maybe the next Lewis Hamilton. But in one of those scenarios, you're doing that from inside the AMG Mercedes team, and the other scenario, you're driving for Ferrari,
and you're winning Ferrari's championship that they have struggled, regardless of the championship winning drivers they put in that seat, be it an Alonso or a Vettel or maybe a Hamilton. Now they just can't seem to make it happen. So what's interesting though is, I don't know, as a fairly neutral, I don't have I have drivers I like more than others, sure, but I don't have a team and I don't have a driver. This has been fascinating and fantastic because it is a major open seat in what was already being set up to be an incredibly interesting and chaotic 2024 as it comes to who's going where. There are 14 drivers that are out of contract in 2024, at the end of 2024. 14. They are Sergio Perez, Carlos Sainz, Lance Stroll, Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, Logan Sargent, Alex Albon. These are basically all full teams. Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, Valtteri Bottas, Zhou Guanyu, Kevin Magnussen, and Nico Hülkenberg. They are all without a drive next year as it stands. That does not include break clauses that might exist, apparently. I guess, first of all, who do you think is the biggest winner out of this who's not Lewis? Who's the biggest winner and who's the biggest loser? We haven't talked about Carlos Sainz yet here. Who do you think, there's so many different facets of this. Like, what are you most interested in now that this is the first sort of domino has been tipped here?
Well, I'm not sure any of these drivers are end up being a winner in it, because I suspect the people that Mercedes would have moved to sign in the event of a Lewis Hamilton changing teams were extended. I think Leclerc would have been somebody they
Right.
looked at, but Ferrari shored up that flank.
What about Sainz?
So Sainz is interesting. I think partly it is the people, like if Ferrari wanted to keep Sainz, they'd have kept him. And now, admittedly, can you pass up a chance to get Lewis Hamilton? Maybe not. But nevertheless, you have that sense of like, just from the perspective of like the narrative, the brand story. Lewis goes and takes Sainz's job, and then Sainz, takes Lewis's old job.
Yeah.
Now, I think Sainz is a very good driver, and
Wife
I also
swap,
think,
baby. Let's go.
well, and I also think like Sainz seems to have gotten along with every teammate except for Max Verstappen, and that probably has more to do with the fact that all the Red Bull drivers know they have to kill and eat each other in order to thrive.
Wait, Sainz and Verstappen?
God, who was it? Carlos Sainz. Who was he partnered up with in his Scooter Tarossa days?
Oh yeah, who was he with? Well, yeah, I mean, and
yeah, they were teammates. They overlapped.
They did for a year. Wow. Okay. Did anyone get on? I guess Ricardo got on with Max. They seem to.
Yeah, Ricardo quit.
Ricardo got on with anyone. Yeah, he did. He did quit.
Sort of like, except no. If you go back and you listen to, because I go back and I listen to old episodes of Beyond the Grid. Ricardo doesn't have anything bad against Max, but like, he was furious about how things shook out in Baku and the way the team treated him. So like, it's that like Red Bull just kind of breeds that sort of intensity and bad feeling. So I think, but beyond that, like, Sainz was like the ultimate big brother to a young Lando Norris.
Yes.
He appeared to do well as a teammate with Charles Leclerc. I think there's a lot to recommend Sainz. I just think the temptation to pursue someone with more upside would be really, really strong.
Okay, so here's the question, right? You could already feel, I mean, Toto, you're talking about Toto. Toto's not leaving Mercedes, right? Toto owns a chunk of Mercedes F1 team. He's there for life. Russell is obviously like one of his little pet projects that he's had long before Russell was sitting in that car. He is assuredly going to be number one driver. We talked last year about how Red Bull figured out the system and they got their number one driver on the top of the championship, and they got their Constructors' Championship by getting a number two driver who's not going to mess with him, who's a step down, not a problem, right? The Ricardo issue we've already talked about. Do Mercedes get somebody who is going to play second fiddle, and what the fuck's going to happen at Ferrari? Because, I mean, Lewis definitely is not number two driver for anyone. Does not matter. But Charles Leclerc, I mean, they invested in him years ago with that big contract. They've obviously extended it now. He must be very confused, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm super curious. Like, this is the part where I love that Ferrari did it because it's so chaotic.
It's so it's
just pairing these two guys.
Great television, Rob. It's going to be.
Oh, it is.
I'm so excited.
It's just riveting. I think, like, I go back to something Mario Andretti said in an interview. He's like, you can't have the two best of anything. There's going to be one best. If the guy's the best, he's going to be the number one driver somewhere else. Like, you can't have the two best at a team, or they're gonna go at each other and try to sort it out, and one of them is gonna like ultimately leave. I am so curious how this unfolds, because here's the other thing. This probably isn't relevant any other team but Ferrari. I don't know how well Lewis speaks other languages, but I know Leclerc speaks all of them. He speaks the Mediterranean gamut of languages, and like he has command of Italian, and that is a team that conducts business in Italian.
Right. Yeah.
And like people who've worked there, because so much talent comes from England, that like, yes, Ferrari has recruited a lot of English personnel, and one of the hardest adjustments that they say they have to make is you have to go into intensive like language boot camp.
And Vettel at least had that AlphaTauri experience of and he's fluent in lots of languages. I have also wondered about and we've touched upon this, over the years with regard to, and I don't like painting an entire nation with a brush, and that's not what I'm attempting to do. But within Italian sports, there is also sort of the racist element sort of lives closer to the surface. I think it's fair to say. I'm not trying to, if you're Italian, I'm out there. I'm not casting aspersions, but I do think it is an interesting pairing for Hamilton, who has, I feel like in recent years, the direct racist attacks to him I haven't seen or heard them much, but like for many, many years, there was like, the chanting in Barcelona, like it's been out there. And I wondered about that a little bit too, that it does seem like
this was one of my first thoughts when this news came out. Cause I remember you always, whenever you talked about like, the notion of Hamilton, Ferrari, or like, how Hamilton might be received by like Italian fans, like Italian football fans established a bad track record when it came to African-born soccer players, or hell, like just black soccer players from other clubs in Europe,
right?
Just really heinous racist shit.
Oh yeah,
happening,
throwing bananas on the field, like just like within the past number of years. Like I used to watch a lot of Serie A, and it's terrific, great football. It's very corrupt, and also there was loads of races, and the ultras like run a lot of the club, depending on which club you're talking about, but obviously Lazio and stuff like that. But yeah, it's right there. It feels very like 80s or something.
I couldn't figure out though whether that would have been a red flag for Hamilton, or would also be further temptation to like view himself as a transformational figure. That like, watch the Tifosi embrace me.
Yeah.
Watch how this stuff, like, it all goes away when it's Lewis Hamilton showing up to drive your fucking car.
Yeah. I bet he does. He is not the type of person who lets that type of stuff dictate his decisions as well.
Well, I suspect also that track record might be why Ferrari had to pay up to Mission 44 and is talking about this joint investment fund. Like that might have been the paycheck covers my services to race, and then for the bullshit I'm likely to encounter, to hedge against that, you are going to have to embrace the social justice stuff that sometimes you can be allergic to.
I imagine
Ferrari has to go do Mission 44.
Yeah, that's a fair point actually. That if ever there was a team that would probably keep lips tight about all that, it could be that. Maybe that's again another broad assumption, but it just seems like it doesn't feel like an elegant fit in those ways. It's just fascinating, the whole thing. There's so many different repercussions we can see with not just them but other drivers down the field.
Well, I think I'll just say this, and the other guy that Mercedes probably would have looked at was Lando Norris, especially with Piastri coming on like a house on fire at McLaren. Easy time to be like, hey, why don't you consider coming here? This is another guy with potential to lead a team. But before all this broke, Lando Norris extended.
Yeah.
And so like there are not a lot of proven quantities out there that I think are sort of ready made for, if you really believe that George Russell is the guy. And I was convinced of this for a number of years. I'm a little less convinced of it now.
Me too.
But if you really think that, then a lot of the names on this list are cool. Fuck it. Bring Carlos Sainz in. Bring, Gasly or Ocon. Maybe either of those guys are fine. Probably wouldn't bring in Ocon. I think he's too desperate. I think if I'm like, in the intervening years, I've just seen too much of him being a shitty teammate and just bringing too much like bad energy.
He does. He seems to have the opposite negative, the opposite bad energy that Alonso had. So then when both of them were there, it was like even worse. What do you reckon? I even think a little bit further down the line, I think about like, does this change like Daniel Ricciardo's trajectory? If he's thinking like, I'm not going to wait till Checo is out of, they're already doing PR with all three of them. Have you seen all these videos they're doing with like Checo, Verstappen, and Danny Ricks along for the ride? It's like Three's Company fucking situation.
That dude, I don't like this. I don't like
it's that. It's very weird.
This content. I don't want this content.
Although I kind of like the polyamorous relationship that they're going for, with the throwing them all in there. But like, yeah, like that's the thing. Like suddenly now there's a seat that a lot of them might be gunning for, even folks who are tied
I
up.
don't
with
think it has
them more.
polyamorous relationship vibes. I think it has like, no, you have nothing to worry about. You'd like him so much. We should hang out.
He's a friend. Yeah. Oh, you're right. Sorry. Yeah. We're just gonna hang out. Yeah.
All three of us. It's gonna be great.
We're friends in college. we know each other. We're friends.
No, I don't. You're just not a good, and like just like the seat is so hot for Sergey. I don't like them being like, hey, just show you're down with Danny Rick.
Yeah.
No, sir, I will not.
Is he coming? He's coming? I thought it was just going to be us two. Is he?
Yeah, I do not. I don't dig it. One of the options I heard that was interesting is Alex Albin.
Yeah, great. Absolutely.
Good friend of George's.
Yeah, good friend. Yeah, and has proven himself. He's matured a lot, and he had a great drive last year.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting option. But it does throw a ton. Sorry, who did Red Bull have standing in last year when Danny Rick? Liam Lawson.
Sorry.
Right?
Yes. Lawson. Very good.
Just another interesting, like, that guy doesn't have a seat. Kind of felt like maybe he should have.
Right.
Drove better than a number of people.
Hey, is De Vries coming back? Hey, is Vettel coming back?
Oh, man. The German company thing would be very funny.
Oh, you're right.
The, Vettel shows up and does the Schumacher and goes to... That'd be very interesting. But yeah, I think for me, I think it's very simple for Mercedes. It's relatively simple for Mercedes. If you're utterly convinced that Russell's your number one driver and he's going to lead the team into the future, if you have a little bit of doubt that you've seen the best that guy can do and there's a lower ceiling than you wanted and there's more mistakes that are going to creep in there than you can really tolerate, I think you got a big problem because he certainly thinks he's the number one driver. And I look down this list and who's available. I don't see a ton of like, this is definitely the guy to lead your next championship effort.
Time will tell. Who knows how much more driver related. I mean, everyone's tied up now. I guess. Well, we thought everyone was tied up before, and then this happened. So who knows? Now I'm not so sure. The ground feels shaky where once it felt so sturdy. We got some more stuff to talk about in a second. The Andretti news that popped, and also some breaking news about Christian Horner, which seems confusing and vague. We'll be back just after a short break. We'll see you on the other side. And we're back. And in the time we were gone, I put my daughter to bed. Thank you, Rob, for waiting here for that entire time. Can you hear the frog?
Oh my God, dude.
Can you hear that?
The frog is so loud.
Is it actually?
Yes.
So this is like they like to like hang out by the door. So I'm gonna, should I go get the frog?
You mentioned the other night, like you have frogs, and you were like, I didn't know that it would be this intense. And I was like, oh, frogs are beautiful. I love the sound of frogs at night. That is intense, bro.
I'm surprised the mic is good because it's very fucking loud to my ears. Give me a second. I'll see if I can get rid of this frog in real time. Yeah. You can do a play-by-play for the listeners. Oh yeah, you fucking went quiet now, didn't you? No joy. So he's quiet now. Probably in about 5 minutes now he'll start shouting again. They're pretty intense. They had stopped, but then the storm came in and now they're back at it again, having a big orgy outside every night. Anyway, speaking of orgies, I guess there was one too many people turned up to the F1 orgy and they locked the door. They said, nope, we have 20 people here. We don't want two more. Andretti, stay away. Rob, what did you make of the news? As you said earlier, not particularly shocking news that the Andretti bid to come the 11th team on the grid was rejected by Formula One, not the FIA, but by Formula One.
Yeah, not a huge surprise. Again, this is all hinged on the fact that F1 is sort of a closed league. And right now, all the teams have seen their total value increase dramatically with the rise in popularity of the sport. And the not just the rising value of the teams, but also like the increase in the value of the winnings based on like increasing TV revenues and such. And so it always centered on whether or not the teams wanted to cut an 11th organization in on this pie, where they're dividing what Liberty Media leaves them. They're the thing that is not on the table is Liberty Media taking a smaller share, and taking one for the team and enriching the sport. So an 11th team would be taking from the revenue that the existing 10 teams deal with. There's also always been evidence that the 10 teams would much prefer someone make an exorbitant purchase offer to give F1 owners a nice, rich exit from F1 if somebody really wants to get in badly enough. So the FIA signed off on the Andretti bid and endorsed it to join the sport, but it was always going to be F1 management and effectively the teams deciding whether or not this would go through. And they decided it wouldn't. Now, they gave a really long statement explaining
very long,
why they didn't think this was a good bid. And that in itself was kind of interesting because it was like a lot of justification for the decision. I think partly it is Andretti's a big name. There's been a lot of interest attracted to this bid. I think they really wanted to make it seem like this was not just an absolutely mercenary, ploy for more money and protecting the pie.
Right.
But the explanations they gave for why the organization, why the Andretti bid was unsuccessful, centers on one. While Andretti is partnered with Cadillac to eventually get a power supply, the plan was for Andretti to come in and be a customer team for an existing power supplier.
Yeah, they didn't like
engine
that.
supplier. And that was going to be tough because, again, these things are hard to fab. These are, I'm not sure anyone's making money on supplying F1 engines to other teams, but even if they are, it's really hard to meet demand with engines this sophisticated. Again, IndyCar had their entire plan to move on to a new engine spec fall apart because the two engine suppliers were like, we cannot start building new engines and continue supplying the current spec. We do not have the bandwidth.
Yeah, so it sounded like they were. Yeah, that was a big hinge point, right? Wasn't it? Was the I think the verbiage was also like if they were to reapply with the sort of like Chevy Cadillac, the engine supplier, sort of as being part of that, then they'd change their mind. And the other one was sort of like the kick in the teeth was sort of like that they thought that Andretti wouldn't be competitive. They were worried that the way they had set up. And I mean, I think they've like employed a bunch of people, like over 100 people to put this whole thing together, or at least they've said it.
That
maybe
one
on
is
paper.
Laughable. Like that is the laughable one where it's like, teams got to be competitive to be relevant in F1. Dude, I spent like 10 years watching Haas's race. If F1 had relegation in it, multiple teams on this grid would be back down to Formula 2, right?
Yeah.
Like it is I have a hard time believing the Andretti organization could show up and do worse than Haas and Williams have for the last number of years. I have a hard time believing they do as poorly as Alfa Romeo did in its final season. So this one didn't didn't really that one struck me as just completely fatuous, right? Because if the standard for a viable F1 team is that it has to be competitive, we've got 3 of those. And we have for a number of years. Like then F1 just, I guess it's going to be Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull, and maybe sometimes McLaren battling for wins forever. There was one other weird detail about this. So the FOM said, having had the opportunity to consider the applicant's responses together with our own deliberations, we subsequently wrote to the applicant, Andretti, on 12 December 2023, extending an invitation to an in-person meeting in our offices in order for the applicant to present its application. But the applicant did not take us up on this offer.
What affront.
Andretti did not show up to the admissions office interview. Now, Andretti, according to this from Autosport, Andretti Cadillac says it did not know about the invitation.
Oh my
After
God.
the F1 statement was issued,
God.
the team's IT staff found the email,
No.
which was sent by an F1 employee,
No.
and not CEO Stefano Domenicali, in Michael Andretti's spam folder.
You're kidding. Is this real? Because between all of the news and the fucking frog that won't shut up, I just feel like I'm stuck in some sort of fever dream. Are you I'm sure that's not. Imagine if that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Most boomer thing to happen in this entire saga.
It is spam folder. How does you run an F1 team and you get an email from at formula1.com and it goes to your spam? He must have just gotten too many of those stupid your
F1 TV subscription is set to auto
exactly 100%.
Shut the fuck up. I hate F1. I'm not going to watch it.
Report spam. Oh my God.
So he said so the response was, we are not aware of the offer of a meeting. We'd love to have that meeting now. Effectively.
I'm sure they would.
But
oh my God.
It's a good, but here's the other thing. So F1's on the one hand, it's ridiculous that it's caught in a spam filter. On the other hand, it's ridiculous that F1 is this meeting was so important. And that's why we sent you one email about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's
ridiculous. These people all text. No, that's bogus.
You're not on the WhatsApp? He's not on the WhatsApp yet. That's it. Andretti's not been invited to the WhatsApp yet. With the other,
yeah.
Gunter just got kicked out, and they haven't added in Michael.
So the entire thing, they're trying to. The other part they were trying to clearly, whether we'd be interested when Andretti is a little further along with Cadillac and all this, we'd be interested in revisiting this. 2028. Let's talk. I believe by then they will have been able to reset the buy-in amount that a team coming into the sport has to pay.
Okay.
So I think when is the current Concord agreement ending? F1 Concord agreement.
Can you still hear the frog, by the way?
Oh yeah,
it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
We don't have
end
dogs
of 2025.
This week, love it.
The Concord agreement wraps up.
Okay.
And just after 2025, we can talk to Andretti. And maybe we can work something out. And I think this is the part that I think really is going to, rub a lot of people the wrong way. It certainly rubs me the wrong way. I think F1 does want Andretti in the sport. I think F1 wants GM in the sport. I think they want all of this. They want a bribe, and they just didn't want to say that we want a bribe. So they made up a lot of bogus reasons. They wanted to have both ways, right? It was, we don't want to offend Andretti and say we don't take this offer seriously. We do want Andretti to come into the sport, but we also just don't want to admit that this is about getting cash up front to dilute our stake in F1. So we're also going to create a lot of insulting reasons why the offer is no good, why the bid isn't good.
And that's the thing I always wonder with, I'm sure Andretti's patience with this has worn thin long ago. And I wonder now, I don't know the character of the man. I don't know if this is the type of thing where he's going to be like, all right, fuck this. Fuck these European weirdos. I'm out of here. Or if they're going to court him more. Or if, they were all like, hey, look, Gene wants to sell up probably. We'll see. We'll see what happens before the new regs come in or something. I don't know.
It's weird. Right before this happened, Andretti was making lots of statements about, hiring and, opening new facilities. This is one of those weird things where, once an F1 bid hits a certain point, there's a momentum to it.
Yeah.
It's tough to slow things down at this point. I think as much as Andretti might be like, fuck this, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I suspect, in the last year, you'd have had to know that on some level, the odds of this going through without a hitch were low.
Yeah, fair.
It is mercenary. It is craven. On the other hand, the F1 teams have a point. Like, a spot in this championship is worth a lot of money. It's worth more than Andretti would be paying up front. Everyone's making less money, at least immediately after he comes into the sport. No guarantee he's going to bring growth. There is a dilution. And usually, like in a partnership arrangement, you have to basically cover the other partners' lost value that comes with dilution. So I don't think it is entirely, it's not entirely bogus for them to make this argument.
Sorry, I left mid answer because I swear to God, the frog started every fucking half a second he was doing it.
Well, the last thing I'd say though is I think at a certain point, Andretti probably had to realize that this was going to be a more drawn out process, and so I would certainly hope that either his plan, their roadmap, did involve we come into the sport later. Certainly with new engine regulations coming, probably I think it would be better if you postponed coming in. My hope would be in this situation, Andretti either expected that it would be a longer timeline to actually claw his way into the sport, or he is going to buy somebody. He's going to buy somebody out. Because, the same thing makes us say there's not all these teams are really competitive, viable entrants. I am sure somebody would be happy to take, billions of dollars to shed themselves an F1 team.
Yeah. You have to imagine it's there's a couple of them there. Although who knows? You look at somebody like Williams. Well, I guess Williams was no. What's Williams going to sell Williams for? There's nothing else going on at Williams. But there are times where you look at Renault and go, well, the fortunes of a corporation like that's publicly owned to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Obviously Haas and everything else. Look, man, it's been a wild podcast. We've had stops and starts. We put a kid to bed. There's been a swarm of frogs. The locusts are coming next, presumably. But before we jump off, do you want to have a quick little chinwag about the liveries? We have had 4
Christian Horner
liveries. Oh, Christian, I forgot about. Oh God, of course. I was trying to make it a fun time, and now let's talk about Christian Horner.
No. Unfortunately, we got to talk about. We don't know what we got to talk about.
Well, so that's the thing. So right now, at the moment, it has been 2 days since this came out. We're recording this on Tuesday the 6th. This could be the type of thing we don't hear anything about it for 2 weeks. We don't hear anything about it for a month. I'm sure they'll want to get something out about it pretty sooner rather than later. The long and short of this is that a statement issued by the Red Bull company on Monday said, after being made aware of certain recent allegations, the company has launched an independent investigation. This process, which is already underway, is being carried out by an external specialist barrister. The company takes these matters extremely seriously, and the investigation will be completed as soon as it is practically possible. It would not be appropriate to comment further at this time. They are referring to media reports that Christian Horner has some allegations. The BBC said that they are inappropriate behavior of a controlling nature. There is a larger, I don't know if this is all alleged. I don't know if there's a larger accepted truth within a lot of media organizations that this is a female employee. We don't know if that's the case or not. Speaking to Dutch newspaper, The Telegraph, Horner said, I completely deny these claims. It's with an independent arbitrator now or whatever, and they, we're probably not going to hear anything about this until that's done. But presumably they want to have this, if it's something serious that has holds water, then it could be the end of Horner's career at Red Bull. And if it's not, I'm sure they're going to want to get this thing out from under them as quickly as possible. What did you make of this? This was another sort of Jesus, left of field.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I guess for me, I tend to be cautious about this in part because we don't know the nature of the allegations, and we may never know the nature of the allegations. I think the thing I want to avoid is having this get swept into the I always hated Red Bull for this and that reason, or Horner's Tory vibes give me the creeps. This is exactly what I expect of him. people that you would not expect to do creepy or bad shit do it all the time, and people who give off bad vibes may, have character above reproach in terms of their business dealings, professional dealings. We just don't know. We don't know if this is a sort of romantic or like sexual, relationship or harassment happening, or if this is about him being a shitty, abusive boss,
manager. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. We have no idea what the nature of the allegations are. And I'm not sure what to make of the Red Bull investigation, because these things can go in a couple ways. Like, sometimes companies appoint independent investigators to like investigate their own house, but really it is to effectively clear themselves. They're sort of put in place to be like, you need to give us a clean bill of health,
keeping up appearances.
Sort of, like this is how a lot of these sorts of investigations unfold. But on the other hand, sometimes it is because the company does fear there's something really rotten behind the allegations, and quickly needs someone to get in there to figure out how badly has the company's legal liability and reputation been jeopardized by conduct, and how quickly can we clear this up and move on from it. And that means moving a manager out. That can be part of the solution. We don't know. We just don't know what's happening here. We don't know the dynamics.
Yeah.
There are corporate court politics being played here, though. There's no way a guy in his position does not have like something like this occur, and there are not ramifications about like where he's going to land after the dust clears. But we just don't know anything about what is actually being alleged here, or like what frame to put on these.
You're right. We may never, and also to sort of hypothesize about them is sort of like irresponsible. So we sit. Who knows? By the time this podcast is up, maybe there's something else about it. Maybe by the end of this week, who knows? But that's where it sort of stands at the moment. And as Rob said, we're all just kind of like waiting to hear if there's more we need to hear about this or not. But obviously, it's pretty big shadow that looms over the Red Bull team and Horner himself for the foreseeable. So we'll have to, I guess, keep our ears to the ground. Not that much time left before preseason testing. Shall we have a look at some cars? Have you looked at? So you have not. The one we want to talk about, Sauber. Have you looked at any of the cars? Have you seen some of the cars?
No.
Any of the cars? So we're only going. Are we going? The rest of them are mostly the same. They're mostly
all right,
normal.
But there's two you wanted to show me.
McLaren. There's one I want to show you.
Okay.
McLaren looks like the McLaren, little bit of black on it, maybe a bit more black than last year. Haas looks very much like last year's. Williams actually looks all right. Williams has a darker blue to it, so maybe that's worth checking out. Type in Williams, the FW46. Williams FW46. Throw that in and tell me what you think. That's worth looking at, I think. And then we'll get to Sauber.
I mean, it's. I dig it. It's
the frog likes it.
It's a frog or a toad. Danny it likes anything. It's probably.
What do you
that?
What do you make? What do you make of the advertiser on the side pod? Do you see it there? Can you read it out?
My protein?
No. Begins with a K.
Oh, Komatsu?
Yes. Completely happenstantial. That is, of course, also the name of the new team principal over at Haas. So that's quite funny.
Unrelated.
Completely unrelated, but quite funny. So I think the Haas social media team was out on that one pretty quickly.
I mean, look, no Haas is ever going to look as good as the Martini livery.
Oh my God! On Williams,
this isn't quite the glory of a classic Gulf Oil livery with the powder blue and orange, but I do dig, like, what I like is you stand back from this car and you're like, that is a deep blue car.
Yeah.
And it's like, what color that car is, and it's going to be identifiable on track. And I think even the use of unpainted carbon fiber in places is not going to like confuse you about like which car you're looking at.
Yeah.
Dig it.
Okay. There's a link I put in the Discord. If you could open it, It's a video. It's 1 minute 25 seconds. Just pause it at the start.
Mm-hmm.
I will put the description to this in the YouTube, the link to it in the description on the podcast. Do you have it open? It's Stake F1 Team C44 launch unleashed for the 2024 season, and then some hearts. You got it?
Yep.
Okay, we'll hit play in. We'll do 3, 2, 1, play. Okay, 3, 2, 1, play. So we're watching.
Ooh.
What do you make of that? Of
Tron.
Very, very Tron, isn't it? What do you make of the actually, I don't want to say anything. I don't, because I saw this and I was like, this is fucking cool. I'll have to. Pretty
cool.
So that we got the floor opening up. It's dust. It's misty. There's a car emerging.
Need better music here. Like if you're gonna evoke Tron, you kind of want that Tron sound.
Yeah, like the soundtrack for the new movie. So here it is, right? It's a black car. They're not giving away any other color. Okay.
Oh man, it looks.
It's getting lifted up a little bit. There's some lights lighting up.
Neon green lights.
They're about to go out. Here we go. This is like a CG rendering of a car driving through sort of a futuristic wind tunnel. Kind of looks like the train between Stormwind and...
Or like that shitty Tesla tunnel in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But the paint is peeling away, Rob. Steak written on the side. It's a I would call that an emerald green. That reminds me of home.
For me, it's almost like highlighter green. It's so vivid.
It's so green. It's like the most green you can get.
It's incredibly green.
What do you make of that?
It is distinctive.
I
think you're gonna that's gonna pop. You're gonna see that car, and like there's a lot of like Aston Martin's like turquoise has never really popped.
Right,
somewhere between like a blue and a British racing green. This stands out. And yet I like the green, but beyond that, it's a very boring looking car. And to me, it feels like if you were making, for instance, a movie like Driven, right, where it's going to be like it's about a motorsport, but like you couldn't get the license agreements in place. You had to file off the identifying markers for a ton of the other competitors.
Yeah.
This would be that. Like this would be one of the cars that shows up in the background.
Yeah, that's true. It does look like it looks like the sort of like default, one of the 3 default liveries you get in like Formula One career mode.
Yeah.
It's very, it's quite sharp. It's true though. You make a good point about like there's not many like green F1 cars. You have like Lotus, I guess Caterham, I think had a green car at some stage, and then
Caterham went with the classic, like again the Lotus green, the British racing green.
Yeah, British racing green. It's like a darker kind of. It's almost like wet grass. It's kind of what it always reminded me of.
Yeah.
But
like I think it's good that it stands out. I think some of the colors don't really pop very well. Like for instance, the number of cars that are playing in the red. So you have like shade, like I'm telling you apart. Like the problem that this team used to have is like on the circuit map, I would have trouble distinguishing them from a Ferrari.
Right. Yeah. Big time. And the big problem, of course, has been the amount of lack of paint, because obviously the black sort of under coat of the carbon fiber has been something that
needs to choose something about the regulations to incentivize people painting these cars.
They do. You're right. There needs to be some sort of like min max on the amount of paint weight, because that's what they're worried about.
Free weight allowance, because this is absurd. And like it feels like we've gone back in time. Remember there was that moment where carbon fiber was like all the rage, and it was like show as much carbon fiber on things.
Oh,
as possible.
Totally. Yeah. Show
and
as
now
much.
It looks really dated.
Absolutely.
It looks chintzy.
It does.
If like too much carbon fiber shows up in places.
It looks unfinished.
Right.
In a road car. Yeah.
Now all the F1 cars are rocking just extensive swaths of like unpainted hull, basically. And it just doesn't, they're doing their best, but like, F1's got to, if you look back at what the field looked like in the 80s, it's just sort of this riot of like bold colors.
Totally.
And now everyone's like, what's the minimum amount of paint we can put on these things?
Right.
And still have advertisers pop. and still have some sort of color associated with us.
Gone are the days of Rainbow Benetton. I'll say that much. That is the those are the liveries that have been shown so far. I did have a link a second ago, but I haphazardly already closed that up. Let me do this quickly. There's one tomorrow. There's one being shown tomorrow. One of the liveries. Let me just get the list up here again. Here we are. Sorry. The Alpine one is going to be shown tomorrow, February 7th. RB, so Visa Cash App RB, the full team name, is on February 8th in Vegas. That's on Thursday. Ferrari are then next week on the 13th. That's this day next week. And Mercedes then, that'll be interesting. Are on Valentine's Day, February 14th, which is Wednesday week. And then Red Bull are last on February 15th, which is the Thursday. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the teams left to show.
I love that all the teams that we know what those cars look like are going to be the last ones. Like, here's our reveal.
Here's the Red Bull.
Like, yeah, we know. We know.
A Red Bull has always looked. You can look at any Red Bull. Red Bull has probably, like, over the course of the history of a car, has probably changed the least of every F1 team ever. It's pretty, except there's probably one team that only was in for a year or something, but statistical anomalies notwithstanding.
Look, Lewis deserves a chance to, like, wear the red, but after he's tired of the red, he needs to advocate for them to make those cars yellow. They looked so cool when they were yellow for that special event at Monza.
Yeah, that was amazing. Who had the yellow car? Yellow. Was it Lotus? Who did the yellow F1 car? It was like,
well, Jordan had a.
Was
yellow
it Jordan?
Car, right?
That's what I meant. It was Jordan, not Lotus.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, Jordan had the yellow car. Oh yeah, John Player Blue or whatever.
Yeah, looked great. And hell, was it BAR had the white car with a big Lucky Strike orange on it.
Yes.
That looked, I thought, looked really good. But yeah, I think, like, we just need we need these cars to look better. Boy, speaking of, like, I knew something was nagging at me. Between Williams blue, Alpine blue, and then the off blue of Aston.
Right.
It's like, I need these teams to separate a little bit.
That's true. Yeah, we're too blue. Maybe the blue. Maybe, like, you only have to put a little bit of blue on that carbon fiber to look blue. Maybe maybe you got to put a lot more red. You know what I mean? You can get away with the blue.
Yeah.
Who knows? All right. That's a silly season podcast for us. We hadn't planned to do one this week, so look, you got it. Frogs and all. If you want to send us emails for the next episode, which will not be the next episode because that's our preseason primer, you can do so over at shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. We are at shiftf1podcast on the social medias. Drew will be back for the next episode. We'll be very excited to have him back for that. If you would like to support the show, that is all three of us, and get access to bonus episodes, the ad-free version of this podcast, and the official Shift F1 Discord, which has been popping off for the past couple of days, past week. You can do so over at patreon.com/shiftf1. We will be back next week with our preseason primer. It's the big one where we go through all of the teams, all of the drivers, all of the circuits, all the good stuff to get you hyped up and ready for the F1 season as it's coming. And then, we'll have more Patreon exclusive stuff coming after that. And we'll be into the season pretty much straight away. Rob, do you expect more silly season to happen between now and the primer? Or do you expect a silly season done? Was it just like a sort of a condensed silly window?
I think Sainz might be really desperate to, like, line up what his future is. But I think, honestly, we're going to have a hell of a silly season in season this year because
yes, we are.
It's going to be like,
you're right.
There's a lot of drivers who are in prove it mode, and it's going to change what their destinations could potentially be. And it's going to change which teams just want to bring in someone from a lower formula.
Dude, we'll talk about this in the primer. Think about Russell now this year. He doesn't give a shit about Hamilton. Hamilton's at the door. Russell's number one driver day one this year. What about Sainz of Ferrari? He doesn't have to play nice anymore. He's like, well, fuck you guys, I guess, you know?
Hey. Smooth operators left the building.
Exactly.
He's going to have a knife between his teeth.
Rough operator.
Yeah, but Oh, here's the other thing, by the way, just not on our list, but like, I don't know if they bust him. Like Alex Palou is somebody in the background looking at like someone who like probably is one of your best bets to be a great driver who just hasn't been in the F1 pipeline. That is somebody I would look at. And I think with those 2 championships, I think he has the super license points. You could just bring him in.
Just plug him in.
But you need to bring him into a serious ride because I'd rather be an IndyCar driver, like racking up championships, than go over to F1 and be like, yeah, okay, Mr. IndyCar, you get a Haas. How about that?
You get a Haas. You get a Haas, yeah.
Yeah.
There's enough of those going around. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for hanging out, folks. Thanks for enjoying, for being here with us. And we'll see you next time on Shift F1. See you then.
Just let that, nope, the frog will take us out. That frog is saying,
Nyum.